My name is Mark Guarino, and I am the author of Country and Midwestern, Chicago and the History of Country Music and the Folk Revival on the University of Chicago Press. As you know, Uptown was the center of nightlife for Chicago, and a lot of wealthy people went there to have fun and had apartments and listen to music and saw movies. That all changed, the 30s and 40s. The area kind of went down a lot because of all the money went away. And at the same time that was happening, there was this migration of white Southerners to the north side, seeking work at really what we would consider today kind of like small manufacturing plants that were throughout Chicago and the collar suburbs. So they needed people to work those plants, and those were people who were coming up here for abundant work. Unfortunately, the living conditions in Uptown where people were going home to were getting worse and worse as the years went on. A lot of the big buildings that we see all the time in Uptown now that are still standing were divided and subdivided into smaller units that of course were against code. They created a lot of living hazards for people. People didn't want to stay in those. So in the hot summer months, people were outside, and that meant that people were playing music in the streets. So all the music that was being played in Uptown was really kind of a direct correlation to how people were living in Uptown. People came up and they brought their music with them. There were a lot of organizations being formed at that time to, number one, preserve Appalachian culture. There was genuinely a fear that people who moved here were going to lose their cultural heritage, the food, the music, the storytelling. Carol's is really the last bar in Chicago that you can get a sense of what it was like in Uptown. It was it could be a rough and rowdy place for sure. Sometimes people had a little bit too much to drink and things would get a little crazy, and you had to call the police. What they came up with too was a crime scene. There was blood on the sidewalk outside of Carol's. There were police tape, but it was the owner, Carol, who saw them coming, lifted up the police tape and said, "Don't worry, they knew each other," and ushered them into the door. It's funny, for my book, I'd finished the Uptown chapter, and my chapter ended with, on a sad note, with the closing of Carol's. The owners of Carol's owed something like $50,000 in back taxes they couldn't pay. It had closed. And it had been closed for quite a long time. The north side has become so wealthy in the last 20 years that this was the nail in the coffin. I had to rewrite that ending because luckily Ed Warm had come in and reopened Carol's, and I think did a great job in sort of preserving the spirit of Carol's while also improving it too for new audiences to come in. It was something that I did not expect whatsoever. I think I expected it to be turned into a sports bar or basically be leveled to turn into a condo building. But the fact that there was sort of a vision to keep that going in Uptown was such a great surprise, and I think is a real testament to the new owners, because they understood and understand what that neighborhood really represents to not just the people who live there, but to the history of the north side of Chicago. And without Carol's, I think that it would be really largely forgotten.